We welcome you to another edition of Being Well Informed. My name is Claudia Barber, and I am happy to be with you on this fine morning. My guest for this occasion is State Senator William Smith from Maryland. We appreciate your visiting us today on Being Well Informed. Senator Smith, how are you?
Hey, good morning. Thank you for having me, Claudia. Good to be back with you.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. I just wanted to bring you on at this particular time to talk more about the topic of the young people who are uh, considered forgotten graves of Black youth at the former Maryland Juvenile Center. Before we get there, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became Senator Will Smith.
Well, sure. I'm from Maryland. I'm from Montgomery County, Maryland, which is a suburb of Washington, D.C. My father was born in Cumberland, Maryland, which is Western Maryland, and my mother was born in Washington, D.C. And so I'm a native of Maryland. And when I was younger, my two papers came to the house. One was the Afro American, and one was the Washington Post. And my father had a habit of cutting out articles of Black achievement in politics and in international relations and in science and in education, and reading those to me. And I think that just kind of made me naturally more inclined to history and to politics. Plus, we're just close to DC, so that's how I got my initial interest. And then I worked on the Obama campaign, and that's how I got really into politics, was through working on Obama's first campaign in 2008.
You know, you have been in the state Senate, though, for how long?
I was elected to the Maryland House of Delegates in 2015, but then moved to the Senate in 2016. So I've been coming up on 10 years in the Maryland Senate.
All right, so what committees and the office that you currently hold in the state Senate?
Sure, I'm a state senator. I represent Montgomery County, Silver Spring, and Tacoma Park. I'm also chairman of the Judicial Proceedings Committee, which is the legal committee in the Maryland Senate. We do all the criminal law, all the civil law, access to justice, housing, transportation. So a very important committee. It's also the oldest committee in the Maryland General Assembly.
The Senate Judicial Proceedings Committee has a lot of important judiciary matters coming before it, no doubt.
Absolutely. All matters of civil and criminal justice, equity. I mean, all those things come before our committee. It is, in my estimation, that, one of the most important committees in the state. Certainly the stories that connect and the legislation that we pass connects most viscerally and intimately to everyone operating in the state of Maryland. So it's a very important committee, a lot of tough issues before us every single year.
Recently, you visited forgotten graves of Black youth. Tell us why that visit was important.
So the history here is fascinating. Our governor likes to say that Maryland is the northernmost southern state. So we sit right on the Mason-Dixon line, and obviously Maryland was a slave state. So we've got that history and that tragedy baked into our DNA in Maryland. We've been grappling with that ever since. And if you look at the history of these two locations, so the location I went to is Cheltenham, which is in Prince George's County. It was initially called the House of Reformation and Instruction. It was for Black boys only. Now, if you just take this whole thing back farther to just the years right after slavery ended in the United States, that's when this facility was built. But go even farther than that. My predecessors in the Maryland General Assembly back in the 1830s had the wisdom to say boys and children should not be in the same jails as adults. Okay, so they
Mm.
created a new facility which they called the House of Refuge, and that was in the 1830s. Finally, got built in the 1850s, but that was only for white children. And they had the wisdom to understand that you got to separate children from adults in prison. It wasn't until another 50 years, 40 years later, that in 1870 there was the House of Reformation and Instruction for colored boys. Now you understand the difference, that even the terminology of the two facilities. One is refuge for white kids and Reformation and Instruction for Black kids. Black kids separated 40 years later. That comes online in the 1870s. So what was at least progressive in the sense of separating children from adults ends up being somewhat of a tragedy in reality for the House of Reformation and Instruction for Colored Children, which is what Cheltenham is now. The facilities were terrible. This is well documented. A lot of children were unaccounted for and died. And when we went there,
Mm.
the first time I went there, we thought it was 80 graves. The Washington Post has done some really good research. The Department of Juvenile Services has done some research, and we've done some more research. We now know that there are more than 300 unmarked graves there of boys, black boys, unaccounted for, buried.
Whoa. Oh
Yeah.
my.
So this history is now just coming to light, and I mean, it just connects so
Wow.
viscerally to our history.
So
Yeah.
based on your visit, so what needs to be done?
Well, I think one thing is first we need to restore and maintain the site because it should be a venerated site. People that have we should have respect and dignity restored back to this place. That's number one. Number two, and most importantly, is that you have to understand the history and we need to make sure that there's an independent accounting and understanding of what exactly happened here at this site. And then once that's done, the state needs to step up and issue an apology, a formal apology for the way and the manner in which they treated these young black boys, which was so different than how white children were treated in our criminal justice system. But regardless of race, no child should have been treated this way. And so we have to start that healing. We've got to start. We've got to create an independent commission that does the research, connects families. I mean, so for at least three of the families now we know we've connected them to descendants, living descendants who were very
Mhm.
close to the actual gravesite, and they're walking around didn't even know that their relative was in the ground, unmarked and unaccounted for. So that's the first step. The second step has to be a formal apology and acknowledgement on the state's behalf. But I also think there is a direct connection between some of these past practices and the through lines between some of those things that we're doing today in our criminal justice system. In
Mhm.
Maryland, we charge more youth as adults per capita than any other state except for Alabama. 9 out of 10 of the youth charged as adults are children of color. 8 out of 10 are black children. And we are spending a lot of money for terrible public safety outcomes when we do it. There's a direct connection and through line from those practices in the past to some of the things we're doing today. And I think that legislation that I'm sponsoring to curtail that practice is all important, especially in the shadow of this new revelation that we made earlier this summer.
So do we know the age range of the deceased in these grave sites?
So for the one of the marked there were three marked graves. One of the boys was 11, but we know that boys as young as
Wow.
5 were incarcerated in this facility. So we're still doing that genealogical research, but we're children. I mean, 5 to 11. Um, that's how young we're talking about. There was a story about one of the boys in one of the accounting that he was so skinny and so small that he could slip through the bars. I mean,
Mm.
that's how young we're talking about. So these are children through and through, and some of the offenses that they were incarcerated for were very, very pedestrian. And today it would be laughable to incarcerate someone for you know for some of the offenses that were jailed. So it's a terrible, terrible tragedy that we're learning about.
Will there likely be legislation advanced to improve or address these forgotten graves?
Yes. So I've been working on legislation with my colleagues um, to ensure that not only is the site restored and maintained, but then also that there is an actual investigation into understanding why and how this happened in our state and an effort to connect those families or reconnect those families and then put that as part of the narrative of our state so that we can continue to learn from it. This is not something that it's certainly a stain on our state, but it's not something we should run from. And at a time when history, especially Black history, is being erased all throughout the country, I think it's incumbent upon us to look these difficult facts in the eye and ensure that generations to come can understand and learn from them, so that we can improve upon our lot in life as we go forward and as the generations past. So yes, there will be legislation uh, to make sure that we reconcile um, this injustice.
Is there a student to prison pipeline that exists today in Maryland?
No, certainly we've done a lot of things in Maryland to curtail, suspensions and disparate kind of disciplinary application for children of color in Maryland. So we've done a pretty good job there. What I would say though is that the lagging indicators, so like the historic underinvestment in housing and education and transportation in communities of color manifest itself in justice-involved youth. And so I think apart from reforming our juvenile justice system to ensure that children have better public safety outcomes and have the tools they need to not recidivate, is also an
Mhm.
understanding that we need to continue to invest in education, in transportation, in workforce development, and in housing. We still have a lot of those inequities baked into our system, and I think that it's really important to have that open conversation so that we can understand this isn't just a one-off effort. This is going to be a generational effort that we're going to continue to fight because it took us generations to get here. It's going to take us generations to even things out and to correct some of those lagging injustices.
So, are there specific data that reveal if certain counties are leading in this prison student to prison pipeline that we know of in Maryland?
Yeah, I mean, I think one interesting thing here is that there are certainly racial inequities in Maryland's system and more stark than almost any other state. But when you look at the geographic distribution, it actually tells you a bigger story that's more devoid of race, but it's devoid of race, but not of underinvestment. And here's what I mean by that. Baltimore City, for instance, is 9% of the state's population, but accounts for 40% of the prison population in Maryland. The Eastern
Mm.
Shore, there are like 7 counties over there. They account for 1% of the population, but are 10% of the prison population. Different population set, different set of problems, but they account for 10%. So the 10% accounts for 50% of our prison population. And why do I mention that? I mention that because it shows you when you underinvest in urban communities, communities of color, you're going to have some terrible outcomes. If you underinvest in rural communities and don't have mental health supports and addiction supports, you are going to have terrible outcomes. So
Mm.
it shows us that the corrective measures aren't necessarily justice involved measures like coming down on someone with harsher sentences. It's actually understanding the genesis of why people get justice involved in the first place. And I think those numbers tell us that. But certainly tacking back to the racial piece, Maryland has a terrible track record of racial disparities. In Maryland, African Americans make up close to 32% of the population, but we're 70% of the prison population. That doesn't happen on accident. And so I think it's incumbent upon all of us who are in positions of policymaking power to understand that and to put forth policies to help correct it.
Okay, an important question about community involvement. What are the efforts the community should take in eliminating the school to prison pipeline and how we can also get involved in any way in these forgotten graves of Black youth?
Well, for school to prison, I mean, look, the state of Maryland, led by the Democrats and our governor, have made historic investments in public education and in community schools because we understand that when you get schools that are epicenters for resources and supports, you get better outcomes. You get food, you get education, you get wraparound services, you get the whole deal, and you're going to have longer term, better outcomes. We've made historic investments in that, led by the Democrats, led by our governor. So and our teachers. So that's number one, to understand that that's how you curtail the school to prison pipeline or ensure that our public schools are very strong and robust and serving the needs of the community. So that's number one. In terms of here in Cheltenham, what we need to be doing, again, I'll go back to it is so important for us to understand how this happened, why this happened, and to the extent that it happened. And then the state needs to publish and make that information available and look it in the eye and then issue a formal apology. And then what we can do in our time is to ensure that we are not repeating some of those injustices that there's a direct through line from 1870s to 2025, 26, what we're doing in our juvenile justice system, understanding those things and making sure that we correct those policies while we're in those seats of policymaking power.
Before I let you go this morning, I would like to learn more about some of the more significant legislation that may have sponsored over the years in the General Assembly sessions, because I know that's coming up in about a month or two.
That's right. So our legislative session starts in January. I mean, we go from January to April, 90 days every single year. The bill that I'm talking about that I've alluded to, which is it curtails the number of crimes that youths can be automatically charged as adults, leaving that decision to a judge. A judge can make the decision as to whether that needs to be an adult charge or someone that remains in the juvenile system. This is why it's important. If you go to the adult system, you are going to spend 180 days or more. Uh, you're not going to get any services. You're not going to get any supports. You're not going to get education. And you could have exposure to adults. These are all terrible things. You're going to waste a lot of money and you're going to be worse off when you get out. If you go to the juvenile system, you're going to have services, supports. You're going to get your case looked at within 30 to 60 days, and you're going to have a better disposition, faster disposition. That doesn't mean that someone who's dangerous is ever going to be out on the street. That doesn't mean that people aren't going to be held accountable. It just means that the resources will be there to support that young person as they go through this time, to hold them accountable, to make sure that we have better public safety outcomes, but also to give them the tools to not recidivate. Because guess what? They are coming back out into our communities. Let's arm them with the tools they need. Let's save some money, and let's have better public safety outcomes.
Thank you so much. You have been so insightful and very, very helpful to everything we've been talking about today. So, thank you again for your participation on our program. We appreciate you being here, Senator Smith.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Claudia. Good to be with you.